I just want to start by saying that I love love. I am a rom-com novel, romance novel loving girl. But there are a few lies that we say to ourselves when it comes to love. Uh, let's go back to the mid 1990s. Okay, my mom literally married a con man. No, like literally, yeah, literally a con man. And of course, at that time, we did not know about it. But let's talk about a few lies that we tell ourselves. She was vulnerable at that time. She was going through a health scare, vitiligo, where your skin loses pigment. And everyone sort of scared her that, oh, who's going to marry you? And how will you settle the rest of your life? So she was vulnerable and insecure. And we come to lie number 1. शादी कर लो, सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Get married and everything will be okay. As women, we are sort of conditioned to think that Prince Charming is going to come and save us. We don't like our job, get married. We don't have a job, get married. Getting older, get married. Not old enough yet, you're in that time frame, get married. What this causes is outsourcing our growth. What happens inside is that, oh, ye banda sahi hai, he's earning well. We are not earning right now, so we outsource that growth to them. And what happens is that when we make decisions out of fear, it's less about the future, but more about escaping your present. So that's one thing that I want to talk about, that marriage will not fix your life. Of course, at that time, my lovely father loved to take money from banks and other people, and he took all of her gold and ran away. So we come to lie number 2. बच्चा कर लो, सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Kids will fix your marriage. Kids will fix your husband. Kids will bring him to the straight and narrow. But children are not fixers. Children are multipliers. If you are happy, the happiness will multiply. If you are sad and miserable, congrats, it's worse. So children are not fixers. Also, several partners, they don't look for companionship, they look for dependence. So now we have something called as coercive control, how to make the other partner even more dependent. You take away social support, you take away financial support, and then there's a child. How will that person then escape a bad situation with all of that responsibility? Another thing that is incredibly prevalent right now is fraudulent marriages. Our con men sitting on Tinder, Hinge, Instagram, LinkedIn even, who are just waiting to find someone vulnerable enough to trap them in a marriage. There are 3 cases on my desk right now where men have honey trapped and conned vulnerable women. Women who are already divorced, women who cannot have children, women who don't have a parent, who are in a sad, vulnerable stage, to exploit them, to take their money. So decisions made in vulnerability need to be made very, very carefully. Do not decide out of a state where you're vulnerable, because what happens is that you enter into affect-based decision making. You decide based on how someone makes you feel, and then you trust blindly in the moment. So that is lie number 2. Let us now go to, so now what happened eventually was that my mom left the marriage, she got a divorce, and I was raised by my grandparents. Things were like very good for a point, things were okay. And then she wanted to try again. There was a man, perfect on paper, perfect in every aspect, and things were kind of looking good, things were looking up. Here's the thing about feeling chosen. It's almost addictive. It's an addictive feeling to feel like I belong and that someone actually physically chose me. Let's just take a Cinderella analogy, okay? Prince Charming chose Cinderella, fine. But what if Cinderella is an older woman? What if she already has a child? What if she was already married and now divorced? So whenever affection feels hard earned, it is more valued. And that in itself makes us take decisions that were probably not for the best. It's another way of your fear manifesting. And for reasons that I cannot legally disclose right now, he left within a year. He left within a year and immediately court proceedings ensued, and that's when we come to line number 3. जो भी मेरे पति का है वो तो मेरा ही है. Whatever is my husband's is mine, his house, what's up 50-50. I gave birth to the children, I take care of the house, so whatever is his is mine. Hate to break the bad news. Sorry. In India, that is not how it works. These two guys are viral on Instagram. A Moroccan footballer and of course Kabi, who left or who acquired property in the name of their mothers. So during divorce, their wives got nothing, essentially. This does not work in India. So in India, what we have is maintenance, which is strictly need-based. You do not automatically acquire 50% of your husband's property to call your own. In fact, there is no law that states that you are a half owner of your husband's house or the house that you helped build. In fact, under the Domestic Violence Act, you can literally only ask for residence orders. There is absolutely no ownership. So when marriages are inherently uneven, there are a lot of situations that come up where the opposite party, who is more financially, economically, socially powerful, would exert that influence over you. Now, the court, whatever proceedings happened, he filed for divorce. The case took 10 years, 10 long years, and in that time frame, I had such a yearning to sort of fix this power imbalance. I desperately wanted to empower our situation to help us fight this a lot better, because if the opposite party, like I said, is economically, financially more powerful, the balance of scales is very skewed against you. So all I could do in that time frame was actually study law. So when people ask me, oh, why did you choose law? It's more like law chose me. It was the only way that I could see to get us out of, this entire situation. Now, when it also comes to housing, what happened was that we were in a rental. And when one person detaches and has money power, it becomes logistically very easy for them to just walk out. And that is what just bugged me the most. So I studied law, and the case went on for 10 years because welcome to India. It's very common for cases to drag on. And there came a point in 2022 where I got very comfortable reading the files and looking at the documents, and ours was like a total mess. I hate to say this, but it was a mess, and it made me afraid of the future of the case. it had also come to this very crucial point in court where we were at the final argument stage. That is the stage that you see in movies where the lawyer goes, Your Honor, I rest my case, and there's a big judgment. So it was a very, very crucial moment, and at that point we realized that our case was a mess and we could not afford a better lawyer then. So it all came down to, when you want things to be done right, you gotta do it yourself. And that's where the fear element kicked in again. Because here I am, like I said, like an advocate is different from a lawyer. An advocate has the license to represent, whereas a lawyer is just someone who's done their LLB. At that point, I was just a lawyer. He had a senior advocate. Respectfully, the man was a fossil with years and decades of experience over me. And he came in with this huge team, and I was spiraling with fear. I entered into this what if they don't allow me to argue? What if I cannot? What if, they chew me up and spit me out in court? And it was truly paralyzing fear. And fear makes the most convincing arguments. You argue with yourself when you're afraid. You argue to maintain status quo. You argue to protect. You argue to not face what is shaking your stability. And what I honestly realized at that moment is that there is a precipice after fear. And as soon as you get to that precipice, there is growth. And there is so much growth that it changes you as a human being. And the whole what ifism in my head, what if this, what if that, what if the judge does not let me argue? I don't have a license. But did I ask the judge? As soon as we asked the judge, he said, yes, go ahead. If you know it, do it. And in that moment, all of the fear, it was literally in my mind. Nothing was real. I had created scenarios in my head that served absolutely no purpose in real life, except that it exhausted my energy. The judge allowed me. I argued. It took 3 days, 3 hours each day, every evening. And towards the end of it, I didn't even care about the outcome. I did not care if we won, we lost. All I cared about was that, okay, I've done a good job. I've done the best that I could in front of a very senior advocate in my first time ever, and I just don't care about the outcome, which was kind of the thing that I care about the most. And it just so happens that we won. Also, now the case is in the High Court, so I would love to end on a high note, but that's just not how the laws work here. But anyway, it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about how fears drive so much of our decisions. And sometimes fear may sound like predictability. Sometimes fear may sound like timing. Oh, it's not the right time. थोड़ा experience हो जाएगा तो बाद में कर लेंगे. Fear sounds like excuses sometimes, and sometimes fear sounds like love. And to be very honest, this is a talk that I not just wanted to give to people out there, but also a talk that I wanted to hear for myself, because still a lot of my decisions I make out of vulnerability, out of fear, out of feeling less than, and that may not actually be the best decisions in life. So, thank you.